Hey everybody, welcome back. It's the Retro PC. Chris here with another box. This is not a slight breakaway. I wanted to show off one of my old collection pieces, I guess you could call it. I'm not much of a huge collector, but I have come across these once in a while, and I hold on to ThinkPads when I get them for quite a bit of time. So this is one that I've had for a number of years. This is a ThinkPad SL300. So the SL series was, I don't want to say it was an executive series, but it was targeted still towards businesses, but it was kind of one of those ones where they broke away from using the traditional ThinkPad design components, so the carbon fiber, etc., which kind of brought it away from being considered a lower value product. It had this glossy plastic finish all over it. It still had like a rigid construction, so it had the durability, but it came across a little bit different. And the idea was to try and make it something that would stand out at the table, but definitely wasn't necessarily going to come across that way. But still had some pretty good design elements to it in terms of functionality. So take a look at this box here. You can see this, glossy finish again. Reflects very well. You can see the wear and tear on the finish here. That comes across very well. Ports wise, we've got the old barrel plug that ThinkPads used up until a couple years ago. Gig Ethernet connectivity, and then a DVD multi burner, and this was not hot swappable, but it was pretty easy to remove. There's just one screw here that you needed to take out, and then with a screwdriver you could kind of just notch it and it would push out of the way. It wasn't hot swappable, but it was pretty easy in terms of mechanically to be able to replace it. Come on, autofocus. Two USB ports on this side. The front of the laptop, you had some separate audio and mic jacks, which was not something that you see a lot, like just in the history of laptops. Often they have that combo plug, and you had to get a splitter, usually with like a little battery pack or something, to be able to use these effectively. LED info ports right on the front of the unit here, so you could see some information while the system was even closed in terms of wireless connectivity, LTE, Bluetooth connectivity, and then battery charge and whether you're in sleep mode or not. And then, which sometimes you don't see, I like seeing this on systems, but you don't see them too often anymore, is a hardware shutoff for your Wi-Fi antennas. So you could one click to turn off all your antennas and go into disconnect mode. And then on this side we had, if I remember correctly, this was an IEEE connector. The hard drive spot here, a compact flash slot, exhaust, and then another USB port and an HDMI output. And if we go and take a look on the bottom here, we have our extended life battery. Now this battery obviously at one point in time I believe was 82 milliamp. We'll take a look at it when we go in. I did run a battery report just when I was getting things ready to do the video. This is obviously the original battery. It's quite well aged. It was a long life battery at one point in time. Now it will barely last a minute when the system's running on full power. But it will still run a little bit. And when I put it on low power mode on battery, I managed to get it to last like 20 minutes before I had to shut it down. Just going to quickly show you the assembly here. What's inside. So the memory that's installed here, this is DDR2 RAM. I've got two 2 gig sticks installed right now. Come on, autofocus. I have two 2 gig sticks installed right now into the system. This machine, I believe, will take up to 8 gig of memory. So, you can get the performance memory in here. And then over here on this side, you've got a couple of these mSATA ports. So this one was designated for WAN, so for an LTE modem. LTE, and then you can see the antenna connectors here. I did try putting an mSATA storage device in here. It would not read it at all. And then you've got a SIM connector is right here. You could put a micro SIM connector, so that shows the age of how how old this system is in terms of what size of SIM cards are these days. And then the turbo memory here. This was, the precursor to something like Optane memory. What that Intel was working on was trying to have the ability to do caching on the system. So there was an option to be able to buy an M-SATA SSD, or not an M-SATA flash-based storage used for caching in the system. I never had one of these, obviously, for the system. Otherwise, I would have kept it in there because it's kind of cool, and didn't live very long in terms of being used within the industry. So that didn't last super long. So we'll screw that off here, and then on this side here, the screw to access the main panel. I'm trying to grab the slotted here to be able to take the sticker off here because I don't want to ruin it because it actually still exists, and these are often, when I got these older systems, the first thing to go. So, so you've got the sticker. We'll take that out of the way, and then we will remove the single screw. Again, that's, one of the things I always loved about the way, for periods of time, the way ThinkPad was built in terms of being able to handle stuff. One screw to gain access to your memory and some of your Wi-Fi components, and then one screw to get access to the CPU, right, to do repairs. So CPU installed here with your slightly dusty, what did that come off of? Over here? Some of the glue is letting, unfortunately, on this thing. We'll just get that stuck back on there before we put the system back together. Some dust always gathers so quickly in these things. This has been dusted and cleaned and repasted. But access to be able to get through to the socket. Now it's a little bit cramped in here, but I have taken this out before without having to remove the entire bottom chassis of the ThinkPad. And I did that to repaste this the first time I think I repasted it, because I repasted it 5 years ago, and then I repasted it again recently when I was just refreshing the system. So again, pretty easy to be able to get this thing all up and running together. And that's that's definitely where you want to be keeping the system up and running here. So let's get this screwed back into place. Put you in and get you closed up, and then we'll reapply our sticker to ensure that this looks pretty. And battery on. All right, so that's a look there at the system. A couple other things to note that are always good to have. The pads are still working on this one. The way this system was designed for airflow, you can kind of see that it doesn't have a huge amount of inlet airflow on the bottom. So I think it's really just, what the system pulls in natively through these vents on the bottom here, here, and here, and then that exhausts out here. You would think that there'd be something, right on this panel here, but that's just the engineers decided that wasn't absolutely necessary. So obviously you want to be concerned about overheating in that case. So we're going to plug in our little barrel connector here because, again, as I mentioned, the battery is not in the best of condition. Make sure I plug it into the actual barrel plug port instead of trying to plug it into the the Ethernet port. And we're just going to do a little tilt here to get this looking good. Yeah, maybe. Okay. Power button. Oh, I can show you the keyboard here. I should have mentioned that when I opened this up. So the old 7-row keyboard, you can see with the original, not the original, but for the time, 3-button mouse area, and then a small trackpad area where they were starting to introduce some of those extra features with the separate buttons. The ThinkVantage buttons on the side for ThinkVantage tools and on-screen controls. This is not, I installed the stuff for it on Windows, but it's not, these aren't working for some reason. It may just be like a hinky thing that it's, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Speakers, and then the screen you'll see here is quite, it's quite glossy. But we'll get this up and running now, and you'll be able to see how things go. I did install, I would mention this one is, you'll see how quickly this boots. Compared to some of the old systems that I, refurbish, one of the things that I'm always complaining about performance on these old machines is, while, an older dual core or even sometimes a single core hyper-threaded processor with 3 to 4 gig worth of RAM can run Windows 10 perfectly fine. But the hard drive is always the worst part in terms of performance. I installed an SSD into this ThinkPad. It's got a 120 gig SSD I got off of AliExpress. It does have DRAM on it, so it's not super cheap, but it was a lot cheaper, a couple bucks cheaper, obviously, than buying a brand name Micron or Samsung or rebrand of one of those guys. So you saw how quickly here Windows 10 loads up. Very snappy. In terms of performance on the system, not a lot of trouble getting around the system. It reacts quite quickly. We'll open up hardware info here. My personal favorite tool in terms of just being able to get basic information about a system without going too detailed. We'll try to move forward here now and see if I can get a little bit better view of the screen for you. That is not going to be completely out of focus. Yeah, that's much better. Wow, so much easier to work off the laptop screens to be able to show this stuff off than trying to get this thing angled properly for the screen I have set up at the workbench here. So, as I noted, we've got an Intel Core 2 Duo processor. This is a P8600. This is a 2-core, no hyper-threading processor. It's got a clock speed of up to a base clock of 2.4 gigahertz. And as I noted, the drive on here is this 120 gigabyte SSD, which works perfectly fine. It does have a DVD multi-burner in the system. Now, I've noticed with this drive, and I think it's just because it's an older DVD drive, and I ran into this problem even as far back as Windows 7, and maybe even Windows Vista on systems, was older DVD drives, I don't know what it is about them, but they seem to have this problem where they don't like to work properly in newer operating systems for some reason. So I found that this drive, it has problems reading certain disks, especially any kind of rewritable media I've had trouble reading, and burned DVDs. Even DVD-R and DVD-RW and CD-RW has trouble reading them for some reason. And I don't get any error reporting in the system. It just doesn't want to work with those disks. One of the things I was using the system for in the past was I had it, kind of stuck behind the TV in our family room, plugged into the television, so we could, watch stuff online. Before streaming was a big thing, like 8-9 years ago, I was doing this. I now have a dedicated machine that's much smaller form factor to be able to manage that. So that's why this went kind of out of production. But it wouldn't play some of the kids DVD movies we had, where they would work fine in my old Sanyo DVD VCR combo that we could plug in through composite cables. So it's just something about computer DVD drives during this time period, especially ones that were, optical drives for laptops, that seem to have this trouble, at least for me. Graphics wise, we've got the integrated graphics for Intel integrated, so it's pulling some of your system memory for it, a maximum in this case of 1.76 gig of the 4 gig that's available. It's not going to use all of that from a regular basis, but it has access to that. Would be a good reason, obviously, to upgrade this system to the 8 gig of RAM that I'm positive it can manage, if not more than that. It could take 16 gig. I haven't tried because I don't have 8 gig DDR2 memory sticks. Those are, I'm assuming, very rare. I've never even tried to look for them, but I had 4 gig sticks in the past, and I have installed 6 gig of memory in this without any issue. 4 gig and a 2 gig. I'm assuming that it would run 8 gig perfectly fine, which would be helpful in terms of balancing out the memory access. Memory installed on this system, as I noted, it's a pair of Samsung memory sticks here. They're identical, matched up, so sometimes that makes a difference, sometimes it doesn't. I always try to match them up if there are matched pairs available. As far as operating system goes on this one, we're running this 64 gig version of Windows 10 Professional. One of the great things about business machines, as I've talked about a lot about bringing these boxes up to date and back to life, is they've got, in a lot of cases, embedded licensing within the system. The OEMs, so Lenovo in this case, they get a little bit of a kickback from Microsoft to sell the operating system. So it's like, they get OEM pricing essentially. But the trick is for them to be able to get that pricing, that lower cost, they have to sell their machines with an operating system installed on it. In this case, they have to say, well, if you're going to sell the box, the only way you get the pricing for Windows is if you sell your system with Windows installed. So that's why you very rarely see a lot of main vendors selling a bare bones system, meaning I just want to buy the laptop without an OS included because I'm going to load Linux on it, or I have my own version of Windows that I've purchased that I want to install. So it's great when you're bringing one of these systems back to life is you never have to worry about an OS license for the most part. Because it's going to have one already, and you just install Windows, and it's going to pick it up off the BIOS. Now, obviously, older machines that were Windows XP or earlier era aren't going to have been designed with that in mind. They were still the old way of licensing the Windows OS model, so they wouldn't have it. You would still need to have an alternative way to be able to get those up and running. But in the case of anything from Windows, anything post Windows XP, I believe. So it's Windows 7, Vista 8. 8.1 and 10, if they're a brand name box, right? If it's a Dell or an HPE, Dell or HP or Lenovo, or even some of the ODM vendors that you can buy from today, will have that embedded capability within the motherboard. So something that's always helpful in my point of view. We'll take a quick look at the sensors here. It's been running for a couple minutes. Haven't stressed it out very much, but you can see it runs pretty good in terms of processor cores. They're running pretty cool. Overall CPU package is running at a nice and chilly 36 degrees Celsius. So it's really not too bad. The highest I've seen this system get up and running to is I think 47 or 48 degrees. So that's really nothing to worry about in terms of a laptop design. My workstation laptop runs when I'm loading it, heavily playing a game or something, it'll get up into like the 78 degrees range. And it's still chugging along fine without any thermal throttling engaged. Obviously, we're talking about a system that was made in 2018 versus a system that was made in 2007 or 6. So, the technology is a little bit more advanced, but, they're not that much different. All right, performance-wise, and when we're looking at what these systems are for, I wouldn't recommend this system for gaming, obviously. But again, if you're looking for a system that's going to be on your desk, this is for online learning. Right now with the current world situation, who knows how long people are going to be, self-isolating and staying at home. Being able to access materials online is very important. So this is one of the things I always talk about, being able to get online, like your local library, or access to something like lynda.com, online e-learning services that a lot of school boards are enabling now for students. So we take a look and see, pardon the choice of video here, but I just wanted to grab something that would show off stuff. All right, we're just going to wait for this to skip. We'll go and test a 1080p, which is probably as big as you're going to want to go with the performance of the system. And you can just take a look and see it does work okay in terms of not skipping, not stuttering. I did try this at the 1440p and the 4K, and it's it couldn't handle it. But again, the size of the screen and the maximum screen resolution on this system isn't going to be able to handle that anyway, so you don't really have that much to worry about as far as performance is concerned. But you can see here it runs pretty well. So any type of streaming video or audio that you can have up and running. So again, as I mentioned here, it's 1280 by 800, so you're not going to be running anything higher than 1080p anyway. Streaming video, light gaming, if you had an older game, anything from, older era systems, you might be able to run at a lower resolution. I don't think you're going to be playing Fortnite on this system, but maybe that's a good thing if you wanted a system like this to be able to sit and do homework or do schoolwork or do work or do some online learning. Maybe you're looking at this opportunity here or want to look at this as an opportunity here if you've gotten laid off from your job. And you need to take the opportunity to re-educate yourself in another field. There's online learning available. Getting a laptop like this that you may be able to buy for under $100. Now you can sit down at your kitchen table. You maybe have never even set up a home office, so you don't really have a space like that. You can get online and be able to do all this kind of work, and you've got a system that was built to last a long time and not fail, that, while it may not be the top performer anymore, and, may not be as portable with the battery life. Oh, I didn't mention the battery life here. I wanted to show you guys. battery report on this one to show, after 10 plus years where it's sitting at in terms of performance. So originally this battery, where is it? I'm scrolling and I'm not reading. So originally the design capacity on this one was 84 milliwatt hours, and it's only able to charge to 12 milliwatt hours now. So obviously that's a huge drop in terms of performance capability, but it does give you the ability. I'm gonna unplug, right? So it does give us the ability when the system goes into low power mode, that we can still be able to operate. We can move around, maybe get to another room of the house and plug back in. At low power, in terms of the amount of time remaining, you might get 10, maybe 15 minutes out of this before it's going to shut down. But it's still enough for you to be able to move around and get some stuff done before it's time to, to go to sleep, so to speak. Which I think is fine for the purpose that you would be getting a system like this for. Again, to be able to run, basic programming capability and having some portability in place. That's why I keep systems like these around, because they're a fun reminder of how great computers were built in the past and how they can still serve a really helpful function today without having to spend thousands of dollars, even if they're going to be a little bit aged. And again, pouring a little bit of extra money into this would bring it right back up to speed. Buying a new battery might be $40, $50, $60 on AliExpress, and would put this system right back into play. And then if you could get the memory upgraded to the 8 gig of memory, you've got a pretty powerful system to be able to operate with. Not super powerful, but for general computing purposes, it's going to be more than enough system to be able to handle what you want to do. Anyways, hope you enjoyed my raving here about this old system. And if you have, if you had one of these, if you had an SL series ThinkPad for work or for play, let me know in the comments down below. What did you think of it? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Was the move not having carbon fiber on the outer shell something that was incredibly irritating to you, or did you like having that glossy finish? I'd be really interested to hear that from you. As always, I appreciate you spending some time here and sharing my love for these old computers and what we want to do to be able to try and keep them operating and running and keep them out of the junk pile. Have yourselves a great day. Stay safe and stay clean, and we'll catch you in the next one.